Jason didn't want to introduce us today, so I will do it. My name is Audrey Galo, and I'm a program coordinator. I work within the Reconstruction and Resiliency Studio, which focuses mostly on post-disaster and post-conflict reconstruction work. And this is Yuko Okamura, who is our design fellow who works within the studio, and she basically spends her time on all the different projects. So she doesn't have one specific program, she works on all the different programs. So she has been assisting me with running the Resiliency Program, and so I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to talk about what that program is. And I'm going to take you guys through this program. We're going to be covering how our organization is taking leadership in resilient cities and community resilience, and we're going to look into kind of the future of the Resiliency Program and how each one of you plays a role in the success of it as well. And I guess feel free to just ask questions if you want. It'll probably be easier than waiting till the end. So first we had to really ask ourselves, if cities aren't resilient, then what is it that makes them so vulnerable and unable to adjust to the changes and unable to adapt quickly to the factors that are affecting them? And so this was important to understand. If we're trying to advocate for a resilient city, then what are we trying to be resilient against? And these are some of the broad kind of factors that we're looking at. And one of those is economic interdependence, right? So that is kind of a source of vulnerability. A good example of that is after the earthquake and tsunami in Japan, there was definitely a domino effect created. So companies like Apple and Sony were at a complete standstill because they couldn't get the parts needed, from those factories and manufacturers that were in those communities, right? So we see that kind of network of economic interdependence. You also look at a company like General Electric in the United States, which was negatively affected because of the Japan disaster, because they actually created nuclear reactors within the nuclear power plant. So, there's the actual kind of physical inventory effect, but then there's also this media kind of pushback. So there really is kind of this connection between what happens somewhere else and how other cities and other communities are affected. And then also connected to the Japan disaster, the Toyota plant, we think of Toyota as being a Japanese company, but in Kentucky they had massive layoffs due to the disaster because they couldn't support that manufacturing plant anymore. So we see kind of that domino effect. So really, in itself, no city is self-reliant, and because our economy is so interconnected, it means that communities are always being constantly affected by the decisions or issues in other places. And just if you were curious, this is the Chicago Board of Trade, which I thought was cool. Climate change and natural disasters definitely make cities vulnerable. So like these people, we really want to hide from climate change. We want to just wait it out and kind of pretend it doesn't happen, but it is. Because natural disasters are becoming much more unpredictable, more costly, and more damaging to cities. It's definitely, one of the biggest areas of vulnerability. And just to kind of put it into perspective, globally about 26 million people have been displaced by natural disaster, and that's about, I think, the population of Texas, roughly. But by 2050, we're expecting 150 million people to be climate refugees. So they've either lost their communities or have left their communities due to climate change. And that 150 million is about half the population of the United States. So you're talking about this huge displacement of people. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to find refuge? What are they going to do? And what are they leaving if they left their communities, right? So we really need to ask ourselves how cities can help mitigate the impact on their population, so on those 150 million. And so why are we so focused on cities? Well, we're focused on cities because of the rapid influx and exodus of a city's population, so that dramatically affects its ability to adapt to the different types of changes. So if we have rapid urbanization, you're going to place high demands on the infrastructure in that place, right? So in this city, everyone's tapping into this one electrical line, right? Because they don't have the infrastructure in place to support everyone's electrical needs. So everyone has to tap into this one source. So cities like Mexico or Sao Paulo are growing at a super fast pace, and so they need to be able to plan in order to kind of ensure that everyone has has their needs met. But then on the other hand, you also have cities like Detroit, where you have this exodus of people, and so then it disconnects all of their infrastructure. So that makes it vulnerable as well, right? So everyone who's left in that community can't really depend on those systems anymore because it might be disconnected in places. So if we can really envision kind of the resilient city and what that means, it means basically balancing those three factors. So having a really resilient economy, having a resilient social network, and being physically, so the physical space, being resilient towards disasters as well.
Audrey, could you define resiliency for me, or the definition that you're using? Because there's all kinds of definitions.
So for us, it's kind of being able to adapt and kind of change to the factors that are affecting it. So can the city adapt itself to a natural disaster? Can it bounce back from that? I think kind of a loose relationship would be like immunity, right? Like, can your body survive illness? Can it bounce back from something like that? Does it have things in place to make it better? So it's not that we're going to pretend that disasters are not going to affect cities or that you're never going to be in that situation. It's just a matter of, do the systems exist to support the recovery, the reconstruction? So we kind of had to ask ourselves, what is preventing cities from being more resilient? And so the sort of laundry list of things that we came up with is that really city governments kind of have the capacity and the understanding to actually implement at the community level resiliency projects or programs. So one is that they don't really understand, disaster. So a lot of the people in city officials have never had firsthand experience. So they don't really understand the realities of what it takes to rebuild after the fact. So if you don't understand how bad it can be, you don't really know how to prepare, or you don't even have the incentive to kind of think about what could happen in that situation. There's also kind of a lack of organization and coordination. So all these different city departments have their own programs, their own ideas, their own reports, but no one's really talking to one another, and no one's really thinking holistically how that affects, the community level. So I think that's really kind of a critical component as well. They don't really understand what resources are available to them. Our organization as being a resource in communities, do they know that we exist, right? Do they know that communities like ourselves or neighborhood disaster preparedness teams are in place? And are those teams talking to each other? Are they working together? Does the government know that they exist, right? There's also, and I touched this a little bit, but there's also kind of this denial that resiliency is an important investment. We've spoken to people in this process who have made it pretty clear that resiliency isn't a top priority. And they were quite honest and clear about it. And that's quite shocking, right? Because something is going to happen. There's going to be one of these effects on their city, on their community, and they're not thinking about having that ability to change and adapt and bounce back from it. And so that's kind of scary, right? Because that means they're just going to have to deal with the after effects of that. The good news, so I have some good news, and the good news is that cities some cities are taking necessary steps to be more resilient, and so I'm going to kind of go into a couple of examples. So Mexico City, they're looking at this anticipatory approach towards earthquake risk reduction. So recognizing that they have a huge population who's at risk of all kinds of disasters, and who are, in areas that are prone to volcanoes and earthquakes and et cetera, they've really made it a point to streamline their emergency response system in a program called Safe City. And so this, the goal of the program is to just create more awareness about the disasters that are present in that area and how people can kind of receive information right away and make the right choices. And so since the program was introduced, they've actually reduced response time over the course of a year. So that's impressive, to reduce the time it takes to address emergency issues. So Sendai, Japan, also, for a long time, I believe since about the mid-60s, they've been working at different levels. They've been working at the government level, at the community level, to really organize people around disasters. So they'll have a representative of the neighborhood who will act kind of like as a coordinator, and they'll have someone from their emergency management assist them, teach them, train them on how to respond. And so that's been so effective that almost 95% of their neighborhoods have a disaster association who is ready to kind of respond in case of disaster.
Audrey, I have a question about Sendai. It's interesting that was in play for so long. How did that play itself out in terms of the earthquake and tsunami there? Or is there a scale of disaster where just nothing can, anticipate?
Yeah, I would say, and Romy definitely chime in on this, but I would say that regardless of, I think the expectations that were set for what that neighborhood association was going to respond to might have been the earthquake, right? But then having the tsunami was something that maybe was beyond their capacity of even expecting that to happen. I would assume and would hope that those organizations are now thinking about, well, okay, we need to make the proper changes in our plan to really respond to larger threats, right? Like another tsunami or something. Do you agree?
Well, luckily, Sendai didn't really get affected by tsunami.
Oh,
You can say. Most damage they had in Sendai City is along the coast, which is an industrial area. So, not much lives lost compared to like all those coastal cities that Michael and Carl went a couple of months ago. Most of those cities lost not only the disaster prevention center destroyed completely, but city halls and town halls, community centers. So, that was way beyond their capacity to prepare for it. But now they know, so hopefully that they'll kind of fall into the reconstruction plan. That's one of the things that they also discuss, especially on the coast, to build their city center, the resiliency center or disaster center on the hill somewhere, so that they don't lose their, not only the resource, but documents, records, and these things.
And then San Francisco, so advancing resiliency through the whole community approach, which is basically involving citizen groups to participate in disaster preparedness programs. And I think your follow-up question would be, is AFH involved in that? And I would say that we, Michael and I, are really trying to spearhead an effort to get the chapter involved with these San Francisco efforts. And the issue with that is that, it really needs to come from kind of the chapter's incentive and motivation to participate in this program. And I think there is a lot of interest. It's just not a topic that's been brought up at their meetings. And so we've met with a couple of committee members to bring it up and to introduce that idea, and they're taking steps towards that direction. So we're hoping that we'd have some good news about what's going on in our own backyard. But it's not really enough for us to go into a place after disaster. So the Resiliency Program is really kind of using that experience that we have and that knowledge and expertise and applying it to pre-disaster. So what can we do beforehand so that we don't have to deal with the extreme conditions that occur post-disaster. And this is just highlighting basically since the inception of this organization, since the very beginning, what post-disaster, post-conflict programs we've initiated and where those locations are. There was the reconstruction effort post-Hurricane Katrina, focused in Biloxi, Mississippi, and New Orleans. There was the Haiti reconstruction program that is still going on right now after 3 years in Port-au-Prince. So we have a regional office of about 40 people who are working with architects and planners to continue the reconstruction process. Our Japan Tohoku rebuilding program, which is in its second year and still going strong and really looking at small businesses and trying to revitalize certain communities. And then more recently, our Hurricane Sandy reconstruction program, which is our second kind of large domestic reconstruction program. And the interesting thing about the Sandy reconstruction program is that our largest chapter is our New York chapter. And it's really been, such an advantage for this organization to have that chapter there and have them already integrated into the disaster, realm. So 2 days after Sandy hit, I was getting a call from Cynthia Barton, who's the director of the Department of Emergency Management in New York City, asking for our help, our chapter members, to help her in her disaster centers, right? So those are kind of the networks that we really need to kind of continue to grow at the chapter level, right? But not every chapter is prepared to do that. So if I ask the San Francisco chapter, who do they know at DEM, what's happening, where's the resiliency plan, where's the response plan, they wouldn't have an answer to that question, right? And San Francisco's our other largest chapter on the West Coast, right? So we realized with Sandy that in order for us to be able to effectively initiate the resiliency program, we had to involve the chapters, and we had to provide them with the right resources and training in order for them to assist in this process. And this is kind of what we're striving towards. So right now we have a headquarter response, meaning that in the case of a disaster, the response comes out of this office, regardless if we have a chapter there or not. We're currently in kind of the some chapter capacity, meaning New York was able to assist us with Sandy, but they didn't have all the pieces to that puzzle. They didn't have kind of the fundraising, marketing, press, knowledge that this headquarter office has, and so we had to, build that up in the first couple of days that Sandy happened, which meant, calling Jennifer Dunn, who is the managing director of the chapter, and being like, you have to call our press person. She's going to give you the 30-minute rundown on how to answer press questions and all of this, right? So it's stressful, and it should have been in place beforehand, right? And then the full network, where we would have a full chapter network of key chapters who would be able to respond regionally if something happened, always with the support of headquarters, but working hand in hand. With that said, Yuko's going to talk about what we've sort of done to move us along this process of becoming more networked and less centralized.
So one of the first things we did was last year we established a partnership with AIA to work on resiliency, and so just partnering so that we can respond after disaster together and have a larger network of architects. And so in March 2012, the Midwest tornadoes happened, and so this was the first joint disaster response. And HQ and AIA were in communication, and the chapters went out and did field assessments for us. Yeah, just went out to Harrisburg, Illinois, and looked around and gave us reports and things like that. And then the AFH Chicago chapter went on to do a design charrette for a community to rebuild their senior center. So that was a way that they got involved with the community. In September last year, we launched the disaster grant program, and 5 chapters and AIA components were chosen to do a 6-month grant program where they work together at local levels to increase preparedness in their communities. So the 5 were Seattle, Chicago, Baltimore, DC, and
Is that ongoing? Is that finished?
that just finished in March. So, yeah. Well, some of them have extended their program, so they're going to continue until May or July.
It'd be great to see those projects.
Yeah, so Seattle is one of them. They went and trained over 100 architects, designers, and engineers. They partnered with the Structural Engineers Association of Washington, and they led safety assessment preparedness trainings, which were actually led by our new regional program manager, Rachel. And yeah, their response to these trainings were so great that the AIA Northwest and Pacific region asked them to provide a full-day disaster response training in the AIA Northwest and Pacific region conference in Vancouver, BC. So, the other one was Chicago. They worked with the AIA Chicago and Illinois, and their goals were to develop a comprehensive statewide disaster response plan and to work alongside emergency management officials. And so 2 of their members participated in the Illinois Emergency Management Agency state-level exercise. So they did a web-based tool monitoring on weather-related events. So these were tornadoes and straight-line wind effects affecting 3 specific geographical locations in Illinois. So this was, I think, a few days long, and they just went through what the process would be after a disaster. And then they're also holding disaster response workshops with municipal officials. So Washington, D.C., they did a bunch of different things. They did evaluation and documentation of pods, which are points of dispensary for the Department of Health, and these are centers that dispense medicine in case of emergency. So they reviewed the current shelters and redesigned them. And so part of it led to the design of signs for the pods at the inauguration, the presidential inauguration. And the response is so great that they've been asked to redesign all the remaining 12 pods as well. They're also publishing an Architect's Guide to Disaster Response. And they have a disaster action team. And they're also studying previous disasters to see how professionals can help out in the case of disaster. New York was a special case because of Hurricane Sandy, but they had a few safety assessment events as well, training events, and then they partnered with the Department of Building Emergency Management disaster hit, they did some field assessments. They went to 9 neighborhoods and talked to the people and took lots of pictures for us. And they were in really close communication with us, as Audrey said, right after the disaster. And then another thing that happened recently was Eric went to the New York chapter and did a 2-day training to build chapter response for future disasters. So yeah, he just went through the steps of what we do after a disaster, how to respond with others, but also sort of on their own. And then Baltimore, they made a lot of great documents. They established a partnership with the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, which had never existed. The partnership had never existed before. And it's the first disaster assistance program that's existed in the state. So they had a bunch of committee meetings. This group started with just one person really interested, and the chapter, there's only about 2 active members, I think. So Martina had a really hard time gathering interest in people, but she did a really great job. And talked to Cooper from AIA and the DC chapter as well out there. And they held a bunch of different workshops, resilient building workshops, and in partnership with NEMA, they held a NEMA workshop. And safety assessment trainings. And they made these great diagrams about their process and their difficulties with what they went through. So this will be really great in developing a toolkit for future chapters.
So the 2-person chapter did these?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Cool.
A really great job. And they have plans to continue. All the chapters actually have plans to continue doing all this work and keeping in touch with all the state organizations.
So with all that being said and kind of all the lessons learned from doing the grant program, during the course of that 6 months, it was really about assessing, moving forward what we were going to do with the Resiliency Program. And we realized that, we had to activate our chapter network and that we had to give them the resources that they needed in order to kind of put this program in place for us, of course with our help and assistance, but it was really a chapter initiative. We looked at kind of what we wanted to enable the chapters to do, and so we wanted to, we want them to be able to train other community groups and inform local officials on the importance of resiliency. So they're going to be able to kind of broadcast that message. They should, have the capacity to launch a major disaster response with their volunteer membership. They would be able to kind of model the rebuilding center model that we use from headquarters. And they would be able to coordinate a network of people. So that's government, that's private businesses, that's other community organizations, the full spectrum of everyone involved in the disaster. This dovetails into our 5-year strategic plan, which basically makes a commitment to develop the capacity of key chapters. So New York being one of them, I believe maybe Chicago being another. So having the resiliency program kind of piggyback on that is really important, because the training that we're going to give them isn't necessarily just for disaster. Fundraising is something that would go beyond disaster. That's something that could help all their other programs, right? And this is where the resiliency program, when I said everybody plays a role in it, it really is, because I think everyone in this building has kind of some sort of connection or responsibility to how this program is going to work. Bridget's shaking her head, no, not me. And I think, not directly that we're going to assign you any tasks, but I think keeping this in the back of your mind of how we want to use chapters and empower them to really, be the change that they want to see in their community, right? right? That's sort of their ultimate goal. And so this is just another layer on top of that. So over the next 5 years, we're hoping to establish a network. So that's really what the grant program was about, was reaching out to community groups and establishing that network. We want to establish partnerships with universities. I think it's really important that young architects and designers start thinking about disaster-related topics and how that could influence, their careers and how they design for the world. And then we want to be able to continue the grant program for sure. We think it was really effective. We think that if more chapters, maybe the smaller chapters, had the opportunity to do this, that they would continue doing so. And in Baltimore's case, it only took 1 or 2 people to actually facilitate their entire program. And we definitely want them to be part, so we want our chapters to be part of kind of the national and even global conversation about resiliency. So we want to look back and use New York as a case study for, the Resiliency Program. And we want, Jennifer and her team to be, examples of how that can be really effective. So basically meaning we wouldn't take the credit, we want our chapters to take the credit, we want them to be outspoken about the projects that they're doing and how resiliency fits into